reported at the top of the show, riots returning to Portland as a group of protesters breached the doors of the Police Association building, set a fire and caused other damage. Fires also set out in the streets as the city approaches a 70th straight night of unrest. Let's discuss the new developments with Fox News contributor Leslie Marshall and KTTH Seattle radio talk show host Jason Rantz. Welcome to you both.
Good evening, Shannon.
Hi, Shannon.
Okay, so one of the local stations, they describe it this way. Police declare a riot again after crowd breaks into Portland Police Association building. Several arrests. They say they catalog everything that happened through the night and then say by 1:18 a.m. police said the group breached the doors to the PPA building and went inside. The group caused damage inside the office and set fire to the building. Jason, we're following this closely, but it seems like a lot of folks are buying the line that, hey, once the feds leave, it's going to be peaceful. Doesn't sound like it based on the facts on the ground.
Well, we knew that never was going to be the case because there was violence before federal law enforcement officials got there. There was violence while they were there, and the violence remains. The federal law enforcement officials were never the ones instigating the violence. They were reacting to the violence, and despite overwhelming video evidence showing that, we still had voices claiming, number one, the violence wasn't happening, and any of the violence that did was just coming from Trump. Trump. It's absolutely ridiculous. I would think that last night and the night before and the night tonight and tomorrow will put an end to that silly talking point. But unfortunately, we're just going to continue to be gaslit by, in this case, leftists who don't want to acknowledge that a big part of their base is violent and they're the ones causing these issues.
All right, here's the police chief in Portland. He says violence is not the answer. He says, as a black man and a public servant, I have a unique perspective. I agree with the local pastor, E.D. Mundane, who stated these spectacles are drowning out the voices that need to be heard to make positive change. This violence is doing nothing to further the Black Lives Matter movement. Leslie.
Yeah, the violence detracts from the protesters' message. You know, the people that I talk to on the ground in Portland, the people that live in Portland, the people that work in the local media there say that there are two different Portlands that you see. During the day, you see families walking around and it's peaceful. And at night, you see a small amount of individuals become violent and get out of hand. Sadly, that is what we see. That is what we're seeing from the media, that, there's all this violence and unrest, and it makes it look like the majority of the protesters feel that way, or as Jason said, a large number of my base, which is not the case. The problem is there is a different daytime group, a different nighttime group, and after the feds left, there were 72 hours in which they had virtually zero violence, zero arrest, and protesters were actually putting fires out. So I do agree with the police chief there that this violence does not help the protesters' message or, quite frankly, their demands, because they've been successful in some part negotiating with authorities over the things that they've requested.
All right, I quickly want to get reaction from both of you all on a lawsuit filed by some protesters in Seattle. They're suing Seattle, complaining that they need expensive protective gear in order to protest. This quote comes from their complaint. Individual protesters subjected to SPD, the police department's unabated and indiscriminate violence, now must purchase cost-prohibitive gear to withstand munitions, even when peacefully protesting, as a condition to exercising their right to free speech and peaceable assembly. Jason, it is getting too expensive to protest.
Oh, yes, it's so expensive. It turns out that when you try to assault police officers, when you commit arson, when you destroy Starbucks, when you throw a munition blowing a hole in the side of a police precinct, the cops have a tendency to respond. It's absolutely bogus that for you to peacefully protest, you need any gear. There are peaceful protests that happen. One happened today. Don't need any gear. I'm there on the ground. I'm seeing what's going on. It's an absolute joke of a lawsuit, and they know that.
All right, final word to you, Leslie.
I wouldn't say it's a joke of a lawsuit. I mean, if we're looking in the Pacific Northwest, I know there's lawsuits in Seattle, but also in Portland when you have people being, dragged into unmarked vans, or we have individuals have a fractured skull when they're just being peaceful and holding up a speaker, or they're being pepper sprayed. The list goes on. I don't think the lawsuit has legs. I don't think it's going to go very far. I think it's symbolic, and that's what their message largely is going to be with this lawsuit, in my opinion.
Jason, I see you shaking your head. We got about 10 seconds. Is that not? Are you saying not factually correct?
It's just not happening. I mean, she's right that the lawsuit's not going to go anywhere, but this whole idea that it's being indiscriminate, the cops are being indiscriminate, that's just not happening. And again, for people who actually show up to these events and know what's going on the ground, they know that that's the truth. I've got plenty of video if anyone wants to check it out.
Okay. Well, Leslie and Jason, we appreciate you both. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.